A very beautiful morning to you here this beautiful Saturday, the 15th day of August 2026. We're reaching you live from the nation's capital, Abuja. I am Anita Patrick. It is Global Morning, and today happens to be a very, very important day in the history of Nigeria, as well with Osun State, as Osun residents are set to go cast their votes and elect the person who will run the affairs of the state in the next 4 years. And all of that will form part of our discussion today on the program. But as always, I will be doing this alone on the program. I have my co-anchor with me in person of Mutar Kasim. Hello, Mutar.
Hi, Anita. Good morning.
Morning.
It is indeed, like you said, a historic day for Osun State and Nigeria at large, where we see our democracy being called to question and put to the test once again. It's left to see how that test will be passed by our electorate, especially INEC, the umpire, and also the people who go out there to cast their ballot. So it's a day that would actually be unfolding in great ways, and of course Global TV will be there to bring you all the details as the events unfold.
Very true, bringing all the details and telling you how it's playing out there in Osun State, because like Mutar has likely said, and the president also gave that particular talk to INEC. He said, use Osun State to show Nigerians how prepared you are for the 2027 general election, and we hope to see how that pans out as they come out to vote.
Of course, he has told them to use that to make Nigerians know that their vote would count.
Definitely.
And the process can be credible, and we hope that INEC will take that order very seriously and also do their best in ensuring that that election is one that will be credible, because that would be a message to Nigerians that, okay, we've done Ekiti State, it was okay, we've done Osun, it's okay, which means Nigeria's confidence in the electoral system will be restored, and 2027 will be one that Nigerians will be looking forward to exercising their franchise.
Of course, and this is the last off-cycle election that we're having, and then it's actually a very good test of their credibility. And of course, like we always say, INEC elections not just limited to INEC alone. It's a multi-stakeholder process which involves the security operatives, the civil society, the media, everybody.
And even the electorate themselves.
The logistics team, that's the transporters who convey these materials. And as of now, we're sure they are setting up right now, because it's supposed to kick off exactly 8 o'clock to see her. And as we get the materials and see how the runnings is, we'll just bring that to our audience to understand and see what the process is looking at.
Most definitely.
And of course, aside that, we have other conversations around health, around the religious leaders' roles in playing out to see what the 2027 election also look like, and also a way of speaking out to issues and ensuring that the people have a way to cover themselves. And then we're going to be looking at around the issue of health, what the health reportage has been like, how wide it's been covered, what the narrative has been to ensure that citizens understand what it is they can benefit and stay healthy, because we have a lot of
very
health
important
challenges.
Conversation, because one thing stakeholders have been saying is we have a lot of information has never really been the problem when it comes to disseminating information about health, but the impact, we're having this information, but things have changed, but not to the extent that is expected. So where is that disconnect between the information that's been dispatched to the audience and the lifestyle and the impact of that information? So that conversation will be one that you should look out for by 10 a.m.
Okay, so while we've given you our rundown of what to expect, we want you to also stay focused. And of course, like we always do on the program, we have a lineup of other things. Aside the discussions, we'll bring you newspaper review segments, and we'll also bring you taste and texture. And of course, the discussion segments also coming to keep you in line with us as we get set to start off right now with the newspaper review segment that will be after this time. Please stay with us. you join us back. Of course, like we said, these papers we want to bring to you, and we want to say that we have the likes of the Saturday Tribune newspaper, we have the Guardian, we have the Vanguard newspaper, we have the Weekend Trust, and the Punch newspaper, as well as the Nation newspaper. All of this will bring you what the stories are saying on the front page cover, but we'll quickly start what the story is saying on the front page cover of the Saturday Tribune. I was just telling Mukhtar, it seems to be very busy.
Very busy with activities. Maybe it's because of the elections.
I'm telling you, a whole lot of stories making the rounds here. But let's start with the lead story here and what it's saying to us. It says, Osun poll, of course, like Mukhtar said, the election has kept people
very busy.
Conversations around what's happening in Osun State, where it says, with the lead story there, it says, Tinubu demands credible election as police deploy 32 CPs, 36 DCPs, 51 ACPs. I meant the Saturday Tribune newspaper. And of course, with that, what we say, imagine deploying all of these CPs. So let's see what the rider is saying. The rider looks really busy as well, but let's see how we can get into that and give you what it's really.
One of the riders says, President says outcome must reflect people's will. Task INEC to use poll as litmus test for 2027. And of course, we've got other riders there which are all talking about the elections. But Anita, one thing is we've seen that the government is not resting when it comes to election security with this particular story, with the deployment of 32 CPs, 36 DCPs, and 51 ACPs. That's an airtight security, if you ask me.
Airtight.
And the reason is not far-fetched. We've seen the restiveness of the nature of the atmosphere in Osun State for the past weeks. We've seen comments by some stakeholders which have been condemned in some quarters as being very inflammatory. And we've also seen a lot of insecurity back and forth, the government and the opposition going back and forth with accusations, counter accusations, arrest and counter arrest. So that's the reason why I think we have this lots of police presence in the state. And it's not about deploying the presence, it's about the impact of the presence. But of course, impact starts with people on ground, and we hope the people who have been deployed on ground for this election would also do their best to ensure elections are peaceful and credible, because the essence of election is just exercising of one's franchise. It doesn't have to be war, it doesn't have to be a battlefield.
So I think you just took the word out of my mouth. The way we're seeing all this deployment, it looks like we're going to war.
It's not
and well, I'm wondering in my head why it's a low intention, but I feel this is. It feels more like it's going to put people off.
Of course, because the people would be discouraged and say, what if I go and then I get caught up as a
victim?
Exactly. We know how Nigeria could be sometimes.
Well, let's hope that doesn't play out.
Yeah, let's hope that this deployment is one that will fortify security rather than being manipulated for whatever interest that there is. But let's move away from that story, and I'll go above the nameplate by the left-hand corner. It says, our codes for human heart is tomato, flesh is bread, hands are fans. Suspects who harvest human parts from corpse reveal. And details you're going to find on page 11 of the Saturday Tribune newspaper.
This is really very terrible. It's good that we now have an idea of what the codes are, so one needs to be very careful when you're moving around.
Exactly. So when you hear this code and you're not sure of the environment, you know what to do. Exactly.
And find safety. But that's not funny. We're just trying to get it on the lighter note. But let's go to the middle there where the story says 19-year-old housewife arrested for allegedly poisoning husband 40 days after marriage. This is on page 7 as well. Why are we starting with such horrible news?
It's not a pleasant one.
19-year-old, she's 18. I don't know, but let's leave that.
Whatever it is, there's no excuse to kill your husband. Move away. Nobody's forcing into that marriage. If he's abusive, leave him, take him to court. Whatever
40 days.
Please. A month and 10 days precisely, and that's not a pleasant one.
Whoa.
But let's not dwell on that story. Let's move to other stories by the right-hand corner. It says, again, Enugu bust criminal syndicate. Police haul in 14 kidnapped suspects. We've got a rider there, recovers AK-47 rifles, 2 pump action and other ammunitions. That's what that story is saying from the Saturday Tribune newspaper.
So let's go below the lead story there and see what this story is saying. It's talking about Atiku asks Federal High Court. That's the question he's asking them. So let's tell you what the question he's saying. It says, Tinubu, Bola Adekunle and Bola Ahmed Tinubu same person? Okay, so we have the writer that says President submitted forged NYC certificates to INEC. Okay, so there's a statement there. I'm sure when you pick up, you read up to
see the details of that statement.
What that detail is saying. That story is on page 20. This has to do with the certificates and submission during the clearance, as in the process where they submitted documentation for the 2027
election candidates, of course.
So when you pick up that copy, you find out details why he's asking this question and wanting clarification on all of those issues.
And of course, maybe answers will also be found in that particular place. So pick up the copy and get the details. Let's move away from that story.
There's a bottom place.
A last story at the bottom. It says, gunmen abduct 14 passengers in Benue. Police rescue 5. Details on page 6. And that's all on the Saturday Tribune newspaper.
It's good that at least we have a rescue play out there for those residents there in that state.
And we have the other ones who have been abducted who also have will get rescued in no time.
Of course, that's what we look forward to, because we talked about rescue missions and how well it's also giving a plus to the security operatives and what they're doing so far to ensure people are returning home safe.
Most definitely.
So let's move away from the Saturday Tribune and see what the Guardian newspaper is saying. The Guardian newspaper leads still with Osun election, and Osun election is what is saying. Osun polls, can federal hawks crush Ede Doves? Okay.
Is it sports? That sounds like a two sporting team there now.
So let's see what the writer says. It says Tinubu charges INEC to ensure credible election. Another one says Uriwa demands strict neutrality from INEC, security agencies. Odeyemi Jifase raised alarm over alleged missing ballot papers. And then of course we have another one that talks about the issue there. It says Olorode predicts peaceful election. And we have other stories also, although those stories contained on page 8 of the Guardian Weekend.
Yes, let's move away from that particular story and take you above the nameplate by the right-hand corner. It says Spotlight on page 27. RHI assessing Oluremi Tinubu's social intervention programs 3 years after. And of course, that's the the First Lady's intervention program, an assessment of it. If you want to see that, page 27 is where you turn to on the Guardian newspaper. Another story is still making the rounds. In the middle, it says Inside Stuff, back page, Abuja at 50. Wike remember institutions legacy. And all of those stories you find on the back page of the Guardian Weekend newspaper.
Well, there's a whole lot of stories still there. Let's see other stories as well, where it talks about the Sokoto, right?
That's by the left-hand corner.
By the left-hand corner there, it says Sokoto UNICEF unveil 10-year climate resilient education plan. That story is on page 3 as well.
Of course, just by the right-hand corner, it's taking us to Enugu, where it says Enugu police bust criminal syndicate, recover 5 AK-47 rifles, 2 pump action rifles, and details you find on page 36 of the Guardian Weekend newspaper.
Okay, so let's go below the stories there. We see other stories where we have the president's face there, just by the left-hand corner. It says Tinubu was diaspora capital, says Nigeria now ready for investment. Story on page 2 as well.
Still sticking with national interest at the middle, it says Nigeria, US conclude talks to deepen counter-terrorism cooperation. Details on page 2 of the Guardian Weekend.
And so a bit of business and the economy there. We see private capital, policy reforms key to achieving Nigeria's $1 trillion economy target. That's experts speaking on page 3.
And at the bottom, the story says family associate celebrate Herbert Wigwe's legacy of banking, nation building. Details on page 35 of the Guardian Weekend newspaper.
Okay, so a whole lot of stories making arounds there, and then we'll look forward to seeing how this comes out really strong. So let's move to other stories.
Of course, that's the last story, incidentally, on that paper. So let's move now to the Weekend Trust newspaper, which is the next paper up for review. And the Weekend Trust newspaper, like Anita likes it, is not different today with a picture. It's not an infographic today, it's a picture of Justice Bunza. It says, "My life in captivity, Justice Bunza. I trekked for about 25 kilometers barefooted." Of course, Justice Bunza was the judge in Kebbi State who was abducted but has since regained his freedom, and is here recounting his ordeal at the den of the kidnappers. And that's the lead story here on the Weekend Trust newspaper. And away from that story, let's move above the story by the right-hand corner. It says, "Over 40,000 security personnel in Osun as election held today." Details on page 29 of the Weekend Trust newspaper.
Well, there's a whole lot of stories there. Well, we know that today's Osun election, of course, that will give us a lot of what's happening, because we're also seeing stories coming in. We're seeing that the polling units, they are also gathering there.
Yes, they are moving already.
So they're moving already. So let's give you the stories before we get into that and then talk more about that. 2027, that's in the middle page there. Can opposition unite? That's a question mark. We're looking forward to seeing if they will come together and be a strong force
against the president's re-election bid, or they would stay where they are, and you know what happened.
Let's see what happened, and that story is on page 7 of the Weekend Trust.
And of course, by the left-hand corner, it says, "I run and jump like an 18-year-old." That's General John Upton Bearer speaking, the veteran, and details you find on page 12 of the Weekend Trust newspaper. And the last story, Anita.
Of course, there we see where it says, "Mother, 2 children die in Kaduna building collapse." And that's the on page 23. And we pray for the family and see how they can walk through this path.
Amen.
So let's go to the next page. That's the other stories on the Saturday Punch. Saturday Punch has its own story.
Of course.
It has still talking about Osun, of course. And we have the lead story that says, "Osun poll, APC Accord wage 20,000 naira per vote." Whoa, it's all right. So let's give you the breakdown to what this looks like. We have 1,906,390 residents decide next governor today amid vote buying jamboree. Of course, we know that vote buying is something this nation needs to put an end to. And then, of course, we have another one that says, "One collected money from both parties in my polling unit." Voters speaking there. Another one says, "Adeleke Oyebamiji calms trade tackles over planned attacks." And all of those stories on page 4 of the Saturday Punch.
Of course, this is not surprising, Daniel. We know, like you rightly said, vote buying is something that has been a menace for a long time, and we hope to see the end of it. But with this particular election, it's the same story for now. Let's see how it pans out. Let's just go below that story. And the story here says, "Hunted to death, brutal fate of vulnerable women, branded witches." And there's a picture there of a lady who has been subjected to some traditional activities there on that particular story. And details you find on pages 23 and 24 of the Saturday Punch newspaper. And away from that one, just below it, it says, "Lagurawa terrorist kill 4 soldiers in Sokoto State." Not a pleasant one, and we hope the soldiers would get the better of all of the insecurity in this country.
Okay, so let's look at other stories making the rounds there. We have where it says, I saw the story was coming, I was really worried about it. Ex-Cambridge youngest black prof dies amid plagiarism scandal. And
that's a story that has been making the rounds for weeks and yet, and it's hard to see that the person, even though of course it's an accusation, no one has really proven that he is guilty of that. I don't know the circumstances behind his death, but it's not a pleasant one for the academic community, and we just hope we see the circumstances unraveled to this particular story. Let's move away from that story to the left-hand corner where it says, "Sacked after 19 years work. My husband still in DSS detention." And that's the wife of a particular victim speaking. And details you find on page 2 of the Saturday Punch newspaper.
And of course, below that story on the bottom plate, we have where it says Tinubu dragged to court, EU over INEC documents. All of those stories is what you find on the front page cover as well of the Saturday Punch, where you pick up that copy.
Most definitely.
And of course, that gives us a whole lot of stories making the rounds. But there's a story that caught my attention above, just before the lead story that came in earlier. It talked about helpless Bruno families sell houses to pay ransom. And that's really not a very sad story to tell.
Because people in Borno, most of them are barely getting by with insecurity, and then they're forced to sell their homes to pay ransom. So where would they now dwell? Would they be we already have a crisis of displaced people, and this is adding to that toll, and it's not a pleasant one. And we just hope they get all the help they need and not become helpless, like the story says.
Because this is really a call for help, really, and it's really something to worry about. Well, that's it with the Saturday Punch newspaper. Let's quickly look at other stories making the rounds with the Vanguard newspaper. The Vanguard newspaper has its own story, and of course, the Vanguard leads boldly there. It talks about the fact that it states, it says, as Osun votes today. This is one thing I've been asking over time when we talk about advocates and elections and how we need to talk to people to understand what role they can play to ensure that the democracy thrives in the midst of all of this. And here he says, will bread, rice, money determine winner? That's a very big question to ask Osun residents.
And the question
because
is,
you will have to live with the consequence in the long run.
Most definitely. But like the people, from analysts have said, even though I don't belong in that school of thought, that as long as we have poverty, as long as we have hardship, then these variables will continue to determine our election. So until we fix that socio-economic and socio-cultural issue of poverty and insecurity and all of that, then people will always collect money. But like you said, with that money you're collecting as an electorate, the question you ask yourself is, will bread, rice, and 20,000, let's say they even give you that much.
It also improved from 5,000.
It has improved because it's 5,000, 2,000 naira. So you're collecting 20,000, but will 20,000 suffice the entire 4 years tenure of a leader who has? Because what the politicians tell you is, I've already bought this vote. It's the end. Even if I don't deliver any dividends of democracy, you can't ask him because it was the on-the-spot transaction. I've paid for this. So the question you ask yourself is, will 20,000 be enough to take me through the 4 years? That's the question before you decide to sell your vote as an electorate.
Okay, so let's take the riders that just below that story. It says, money will influence outcomes. Stakeholders speaking. We also have parties transferring 20,000 naira, 10,000 naira, 5,000 naira. Okay, 5,000 is still in the range. Okay.
Purchasing power, you're gaining power.
So we also have another one says parties transfer. Okay, we have below says violence, thuggery, hate speech take center stage instead of the real issues to discuss. We also have another one that says politicians desert homes. Of course, they should. And other stories there says
competence, credibility will matter, and that is the ex-lawmaker speaking there. Of course, we are putting all of this. Is it competence and credibility you're voting for, or is it the money, influence, and all the other variables? You put them side by side and you decide as a voter. If I was you as a voter, of course, competence and credibility should be what should guide your decision-making process, because that is what endures in a democracy.
Okay, so let's hope that pans out well, because, like I said, the process of voting is also ongoing right now. So let's see.
Away from that story, a related story. It says, pro-political violence. That is Governor Adeleke speaking on page 11, and he has got two riders. First one says, APC raises alarm over alleged importation of thugs into government house. And the second rider says, Adeleke's camp to security agencies, be neutral, professional. And that's all the stories. This particular story you find on page 11, just next to the first one we gave you on page 10 of the Vanguard newspaper. Okay,
so let's look at other stories making the rounds as well. What we have by the left-hand corner there is talking about the NIMR crisis deepens as research professors face premature retirement. Story on page 13 by the left-hand corner there.
And of course, the story in the middle says, a lot of worries. 5th coronation anniversary begins with praise singing. Details on page 6. Another story is Anite.
Okay, so beside that story there, towards the right hand, it says Enugu bursts criminal syndicates, police nab kidnap suspects. Story on page 7 as well.
And a bit of entertainment by the foremost right hand corner. It says how two Baba Teni Others honored Daddy Shoki at 50 years on stage concert. Details on page 16 of the Vanguard newspaper.
So while we look at those stories, let's go above the nameplates and see other stories making the rounds there. And then we have where it says to the left-hand corner there, talking a bit about sports. Westerhoff writes Tinubu, then the writer says fans, ex-internationals call for overhaul of NFF board.
And of course, it's something that I think, if you ask me, is long overdue, because we've seen even the ladies that used to be the pride of the nation, Aniti.
For the first time,
they crashed out, they didn't win for the first time, and for the first time ever, Nigeria is not going to be at the Women's World Cup. That's the lowest of the lows, if you ask me. So this is something that we should see happening, and results should be delivered.
All right, let's move away from sports. Still talking about issues around 2027 and what it's saying. There in the middle, there it says 2027. Atiku asks courts to disqualify Tinubu over names and certificates controversy. Story on page 5.
And of course, to Kwara State, it says how Governor Abdul Razak restored glory of primary basic education, took public schools to world stage. And details you find on page 4 of the Vanguard newspaper.
And that gives us a summary of what it looks like today with the Vanguard newspaper. And of course, that should be like what's rounding up right now to say it's an amazing story. It's making the rounds, of course, on the front page covers of the dailies. And we need to pick up and digest these things. And then for those in Osun State, just like the papers have said, just like we've seen a lot of concerns here, pay attention, vote your conscience, exercise your franchise, ensure that you vote who you're confident of that in the next 4 years.
The dividends of democracy. Not stomach infrastructure, please, because stomach infrastructure is just a temporary fix. We need people who would fix the larger system, which will make Osun State work for all of you in the long run, of course.
Okay, and of course, that brings us to the size of the dailies this hour of the program. And up next for us is Taste and Texture. Let's have you have breakfast and you join us on our first discussion this morning. Stay with us.
Hello everyone, this is to specially welcome you to this episode of Taste and Texture, and it promises to be as engaging as it will be eye-opening. On the show, we're going to prepare a healthy delicacy and we will be preparing it from scratch. In today's episode of the program, we'll be preparing chicken toast, which is always a healthy, delicious and simple breakfast option. Also, this breakfast chicken toast can be made very quickly by anyone. In addition to the speed and ease of making it, it is also fun to make. Ingredients: sliced bread, chicken breast, eggs, seasoning, salt, black pepper, paprika, mayonnaise, cabbage and carrots. Step 1. Wash and season your chicken breast with your mixed spices. Step 2. Add some oil to a grill pan and heat up. Add the chicken breast and grill till the chicken is well cooked and charred. Step 3. Transfer the cooked chicken breast to a pan and shred. Step 4. Add the shredded chicken into a bowl. Shred your cabbage and carrot, then add to the bowl of chicken. Step 5. Add some boiled eggs into the mixture, then drizzle your mayonnaise all over it and mix. Step 6. Butter your toaster and arrange the bread. Add your chicken filling and cover it with another bread. Step 7. Lightly butter the bread and cover the toaster to cook. There you have it. Your breakfast chicken toast is ready. You can serve your chicken toast with tea, coffee, hot chocolate, and more. Enjoy! That's it on today's episode of the program Taste and Texture. Hope you will try these recipes in your various homes and hope you enjoyed the program. Join me same time next week for another episode of the program. I am Sa'adatu Garba. Thank you for watching. See you on the next one.
In an age of breaking news, you need a trusted source that prioritizes accurate, factual, and unbiased reporting. This is AM News, and I am Ubong Usoro.
On global television, our news is rooted in verified and authoritative storytelling that keeps you educated, informed, and enlightened on all the issues that matter to you. I am Sadia Yakubu. This is Midday News.
You can trust a multi-platform news broadcast real-time and fast-check stories for all the big local and foreign headlines round the clock. I am Ramsey Enoch Abo. This is News Express.
Our array of anchors delivers the news to our teeming viewers, breaking it down with context and perspective. This is News Cycle on Global Television. I am Anieti Patrick.
And the flagship news is your hub for the day's most engaging stories. This is News Prime, and I am Jumai Manson.
Did you miss any of our news rounds? No worries. Catch up at 10 p.m. and midnight, 7 days of the week. I am Mukhtar Kasim.
Global TV is on DSTV channel 365 and Star Times channel 276. We're active across all social media platforms at Global TV NG.
In an age of breaking news, you need a trusted source that prioritizes accurate, factual, and unbiased reporting. This is AM News, and I am Ubong Usoro.
On global television, our news is rooted in verified and authoritative storytelling that keeps you educated, informed, and enlightened on all the issues that matter to you. I am Sadia Yakubu. This is Midday News.
You can trust a multi-platform news broadcast real-time and fast-check stories for all the big local and foreign headlines round the clock. I am Ramsey Enoch Abo. This is News Express.
Our array of anchors delivers the news to our teeming viewers, breaking it down with context and perspective. This is News Cycle on Global Television. I am Anieti Patrick.
And the flagship news
It's good to have you join us back on the program. It's still Global Morning. Of course, like we said, we have a very serious conversation we want to bring to you. But let's give you a background to it. Religion remains one of the most influential forces in Nigerian society. For millions of Nigerians, religious leaders are not simply spiritual figures. They are trusted voices whose messages can influence attitude towards leadership, justice, peace, morality, human rights, and national responsibility. That influence places a significant responsibility on religious leaders, particularly in a country facing insecurity, poverty, corruption, unemployment, political tension, ethnic divisions, and concerns over freedom of religion. The debate has become even more relevant following recent interventions by the Nigeria Inter-Religious Council, NIREC, on insecurity, killings, religious harmony, and the need for Nigerians to resist the manipulation of religion for political interests. NIREC has previously called on religious leaders to resist political manipulation of religion and urged political leaders to pursue peace, unity, and harmony. It has also emphasized that Nigeria is not a religious state and that the welfare and common good of citizens should remain central to leadership. The federal government has also recently stressed the importance of partnership with faith communities and other stakeholders in addressing national challenges, describing collaboration with religious institutions as important to peace, social cohesion, and national development. Against this backdrop, Global Morning is asking a lot of questions, and these are the concerns that brought us to talking about this. Are Nigerians religious leaders doing enough to promote good governance, defend religious freedom, and also hold political leaders accountable? That's one. And perhaps more importantly, let's look at when should religious leaders move beyond prayers and sermons to become stronger voices for justice, accountability, and citizens program. That's one of the focus, or one of the things that made us look at all of this issue. And then we have objectives to all of this discussion. And this seeks to examine the constitutional and moral importance of religious freedom in Nigeria, assessing the responsibility of religious leaders in promoting good governance, examine NIREC's role in promoting religious harmony, because they consist of 500 members, 250 Christian, 250 Muslim, of course. That's the two major religions where it's actually practiced in Nigeria and national. So we're looking at the harmony they play and also promoting national unity. We're going to be looking at recent concerns surrounding religious freedom and perceived discrimination. We're going to look at the dangers of politicians exploiting religious identity, also looking how to explore how religious leaders can promote accountability without becoming partisan. We're going to look at the faith leaders, how they consider issues, publicly challenging government policies. We're going to look at relationship between freedom of religion, freedom of expression, and national security. Identify practical ways Muslim, Christians, all other religion leaders can work together ahead of the 2027 general election. I am sure that gave you a very good background to understand why this conversation is quite timely. Well, welcome to the discussion segments of Global Morning. Mukhtar, of course.
It's a great one to be on this particular segment, and it's a discussion that is long overdue and we cannot get enough of, because once all of these narratives do not get put out there, Nigeria's democracy cannot grow and we cannot be where we need to be as a nation unless we have discussions like this, Anita. So it's very timely.
Quite timely, and that's one of the reasons why we felt it was very important, because we've given you quite the background to how this should look like. Let's quickly get down to where our guest, because we have our guest who is going to speak to this issue and give us a guide to it. And joining us, of course, to have a very intense conversation is Mr. Felix Marie. He is the country representative, Faith and Freedom Africa. Mr. Felix, it's good to have you join us on the program today.
Thank you very much.
Amazing discussion. You understand this background to all of these issues. One of the reasons why we felt you're a strong voice to also lend your voice to this. What is the proper role of a religious leader in a democratic or a democracy spiritual guide platform? Because it seems to be we mixing up that role of where practical constitutional rights should play out and then religion come into. So what is the proper role of religious leader in a democracy?
Thank you very much, and I'm happy to be here again on a conversation that has to do with religion in Nigeria. For me, I have most of my life worked in this cycle of religion. I have been a communication officer in a religious environment for over 10 years. And I've also worked with various religious leaders like Christians and Muslim religious leaders in my job as the country representative of Faith and Freedom Africa, where we discuss together issues that has to do with religion in Nigeria. I think the role of religious leader in Nigeria's political space or economic space cannot be overemphasized, because religious leaders in Nigeria, they have a very, very vital role looking at their own position as people that have the trust of Nigerians. Over 100 million Nigerians are Christians. Over 100 million Nigerians are Muslims. Therefore, if we have over 250 or so million people in Nigeria, already 200 million plus of them are already people that identify with either Christianity or Islam. And so these people are people who go to church willingly, not under any compulsion, or go to mosque willingly, not under any duress. These are people that trust of all the numbers we have counted lie in their hands. So they are very influential when it comes to the issue of political decision.
Now, I'd like for us to, as a follow-up now,
Yes.
to have this distinction where, because religious leaders, they tell you they are Nigerians also, which means they have the right to participate in every democracy. But where do we draw that line between being a participation in that democracy and being partisan, especially with the fact that you have a lot of people who look up to you as a leader? So where do we draw that line between exercising your views as a religious leader and not delving into partisan politics, perhaps?
First of all, I think we should also understand the constitutionality of our rights when it has to do with the right to freedom of expression, the right to freedom of association, and then also the right to participate in election when it comes to your right as a citizen to be person who will have opinion about who should become a leader. But we should also draw a line where you use a platform that is given to you as a religious leader, exploiting that platform, instigating people against the other. Expressing your view, your personal view, should not be exploiting a platform that is meant for a different purpose. And so I think there is a thin line between being a religious leader who has his personal opinion and being a religious leader who uses the religious platform to say things that are actually his personal opinion, but using that platform that has influence over people. And so if you have the religious platform, it's interesting for people to know that you are here on the religious platform for their own spiritual edification. And if you use it for that purpose, it's wonderful. And so if you have a personal platform that is not religious platform, not religious gathering, and you use that for whatsoever personal view, people will be able to distinguish between you using your personal space to do your personal things. But that also, having said that, that also we should know that once you have become a religious figure, wherever you are, even in your own house, there are things that will be associated to your own religious disposition or your responsibility as a religious leader. And so that calls for carefulness and also self-checking, that you know that things you say is always considered that is coming from a religious leader.
Very important.
Well, quite important. And I like the fact that NAREC, which was established as a platform to bring in both faith, Christianism, is also speaking to this issue and talking about understanding, having a dialogue play out for leaders, not also looking at just one side. Just like you said, your platform should be your platform to speak to issues, and don't use that to buy into what is not supposed to play out for people. So let's look at how effective has NAREC been in fulfilling this mandate given to them to ensure that they curtail and also ensure that people understand the role they are supposed to play and not just jump into conversations. Because when you look at the issue around democracy, it's very important in Nigeria being a democratic nation, and we cannot have people jumping on issues and getting others stained, because that's the way of staining the image of the religious faith. You know, so how effective do you think, or do you think they're sufficient enough in handling the issue for religious leaders?
I think NAREC is every day improving and growing and becoming more popular in the eyes of Nigerians, because NAREC has been here for some time, and NAREC is a very prominent institution in Nigeria. Of course, the only institution in Nigeria where Christians and Muslims come together. And I think it's important for us to also know that NAREC is co-chaired by the Khan president and of course the Sultan. And so this is a very prominent organization. But I always say that NAREC does not have constitutional backing or government, the duty bearer backing, to be able to do things that regards on religion. Because NAREC will only advise and make suggestions as to how we can live together in peace, Christians and Muslims in this country. But when it comes to issue of religious liberty in Nigeria, it goes beyond them, because they may not be in a position to ensure that violations of freedom of religion, either in utterances that people make or in actions that people take, has been taken care of as to how it should be. And so for me, I feel that NIREC is becoming more and more acceptable, more and more understood in Nigeria, and they should increase their volume. They should increase their engagement with people, so that people will know that there is a trusted and then also credible body that is sitting all the time together, 500 people, to talk about religious harmony, especially between Christians and Muslims in Nigeria.
Now, talking about NIREC, we've seen, like you said, that's the body that has been constituted for that particular reason. But most times you see that it is statement issued. So is there a way that a mechanism can be deployed where the communities, before all of these things break out, NIREC is at the top before they even give early warning signs and all of that to avert
like
this proactive rather than being reactive.
Yes, I think by virtue of my relationship with NIREC and other bodies in Nigeria, NIREC does not have any funding to be able to engage deeper than what they are doing today, because there is no any provision anywhere that this is a funding that NIREC should have to run its own affairs. In my own opinion, Nigeria has come to a point where we need a government established body, a government established, even if it's going to be just a kind of task force, maybe presidential task force on religion or religious liberty in Nigeria, than leaving everything as it is, because NIREC only plays advisory role. They cannot go and be talking about early warning signs and then making a prescription as to what should be done, and then also profiling maybe legislative parameters that Nigeria's religious space will be run by that. I think they are doing what they can do within what they have in their own association. I call it association because this is an organization that is willingly accepted among the two religions to do that. But if the government establishes a body and empower it either by the act of parliament or even executive order, that this body is responsible for the issues of religious liberty, is responsible for issues of interfaith dialogue or relationship in Nigeria, and that there are ways that will be able to check excesses, not to curtail preaching, because we shouldn't also be able to infringe on the Constitution, because the Constitution says in section 38 that you have the right to propagate your religion. This is your right.
Yes.
You have the right to manifest your religion, and you have the right also to practice your religion. And so we should have experts who would look at the thin lines and be able to draw a very sound barriers that people will not cross in either utterances. And I don't see reason why someone will have religious platform and be talking about another religion. For instance, you have people before you to preach goodness to them, to bring them to God, to make them feel that they are part of a society here on earth and that they are looking for their own life after. And then you begin to talk about another religion, comparing it in such a way that discredits or instigate people. So this is also something that needs to be carefully looked at in this country.
I think sometimes there's this play out that comes out in most cases. So we want to ask this: are we sometimes confusing religious persecution with insecurity, and then criminality, ethnic conflicts, or political competition? Because that seems to be like what it looks like in some cases.
Because some places it might be actually insecurity, but people paint it
to
of religion.
So does that play out in most cases?
Yeah, I think this is something interesting that I've always liked to talk about. The truth is, if we don't have a body that focuses on actually getting to the root causes of our problems in Nigeria, sometimes we will allow into some of these narratives that are perceived or even created by people. If you talk about a community or a village that is attacked, which is happening in this country, and this village happened to be predominantly a Christian community. Now the question we need to answer or need to ask is that, are these people actually attacked solely because of their own religion? Or could we even be able to ascertain that these people are attacked because of their religion? Because it could be criminality. Many times it has been criminality. And sometimes also it has historical antecedents. And so these things need to be followed to the letter. And then everybody would be able to understand that this is why this happened. But I tell you, it is not the work of civil society alone, it is the work of the duty bearer also. To be able to say that, okay, whatever that it is, we need to know the root causes of these things and also forestall further occurrences of these things. And if we are talking about attacks on people, where is the criminal line? Where is the failure on the part of the duty bearer also to be able to provide security to the lives and properties of people? All these things comes to play.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that tells us how we can navigate through these issues if only we have understanding to what should stand and at what time what should play out, because that seems to be a lot of concern that have. But let's talk about objectivity. How do we objectively determine when an incident is genuinely religious persecution? Because just like you said, how this plays out and all that, and when is religion being used to explain what is essentially a political, ethnic or economic or criminal conflict that comes in the long run? Because as we are building up to 2027 elections, of course, because this is the electoral period, all of this is what will play out as we get,
especially involving political actors. We see that they tend to pitch the two religions. That's the major thing we talk about. They tend to use religion to pitch, they tend to use politics, and then they paint it with a coloration of religion to pitch those two religions against each other. So how do we handle things like, especially with the adherents of these religions?
First of all, I think we need to understand the maybe multiplicity of our own identity as Nigerians. You come to a place, I am first, whether I belong to a particular ethnic group. And then I will say I belong to a state, and then I belong to religion. And some of these things, like religion, are things that you could change, right? This is an identity that can change. Change in the sense that you can say today, I don't want to be a Christian again, or I don't want to be a Muslim again. And this is also permissible or acceptable under Section 38 of the Constitution, that you have the right to change your religion. If you change your religion, that means that identity of religion has changed. This means that this is one of the identity that is on the surface. But I cannot change my ethnic identity, for instance.
Very true.
This is another identity that may be permanent because I am born into this. But you could be born into a religious family. You can decide not to continue in that religion. And so you need to understand when things happen to people, we need to look at the layers of identity they belong to. And Christians can say they are persecuted because of that Christian identity. If it is a Christian village or community, they may not look at the other identities, they will choose to look at their Christian identity. And so it could also be that it is an ethnic persecution. They can say that our ethnic group is been under persecution for so long. But if they choose not to look at their ethnic group and look at their own religious identity to be the most prominent, an identity that can even change, because they can decide to change it and look at it as being the only thing that will now future, then you will now look at that there is an implication of something is being implicated here. And that thing that is implicated is the religion. Because this is the only identity that is easily, ably implicated. Because people see it as such thing that when I say I am persecuted because of my religion, it attracts a lot of sympathy. But if I said I'm persecuted because of my tribe, probably nobody will listen to me or nobody will say much about it.
Because we're very
multi. Yes. So these are some of the complexities that also play out. But the thing is, why should we even be talking about people being persecuted or people are being killed or so many criminality or going on in this country? I think it is time we come together. For me, I feel that if for instance, the Catholic bishops are going to the president, it should also be that not only the Catholic bishops are going, but that they should be able to come together, Christians and Muslims. Let's say the NIREC or other Christian leaders come together and go to the president and speak in one voice. Our people are being killed. We don't care whether they are this particular ethnic group or this religion, but we are living in a country that we can no longer even travel from one village to the other. And some people are totally not in their homes.
So talking about voices, and we've had, just like you mentioned, an issue of insecurity, unemployment, a whole lot of issues raised around poverty, corruption play out. But let's look at our religious leaders. Why do some religious leaders appear to be very, very vocal when it comes to election period, but after the election they become less vocal after leaders have assumed offices? Because I see in most cases some of them seem to fight and prepare to be elected, but governance process, they learn on the process and they struggle to even bring out to those answers. And then the religious leaders who are supposed to speak to these issues will now not talk anymore, but they just speak during the lecture.
Maybe you, the media, did not follow them up when there is no election. You are only following them up when there is election. And so the religious leaders, they are always there, right? And they are always preaching every Sunday, every Friday. They are talking to people. But it's true that there is an increasing voices about the issues of this country. And sometimes some of these things are not even directed properly. Because at this point in time, I think religious leaders should focus more on guiding people to make informed decisions. To tell them that it is their duty to go out and vote. Because for me, I will never be happy as a Nigerian to see that my country of over 150 million eligible voters will only decide who becomes a president with less than 50,000 votes. I'm talking about a country that is interested in democracy. And who will make these people, the citizens of this country, to be interested in democracy? It is the religious institutions. Because this is where people go every day. This is where people have trust and confidence in. And so the religious leaders should now be focusing more on guiding people to come out and vote and to make informed decisions, not to guide them in saying that they should vote for their own religion, even when they know that this is not their duty to do so. And so this is my own take on this.
Now I'd like for us to do like a follow-up, which is after elections and accountability in terms of religious leaders. After elections, people are in governance already, politicians, and they're not really performing to the standard expected. Religious leaders, what's their role there? Can they come out and publicly criticize these leaders? Because if they don't do that, some of the leaders will feel, some of the followers will think, since my leader has not said anything, then everything is good and fine. So what should religious leaders do in that particular aspect?
First of all, part of democracy is not just to go and vote. It's asking for accountability.
True.
And so if citizens know that they have the right to ask for accountability, they will always ask for accountability. There is what is called the prophetic voice. The prophetic voice is the voice that speaks to the conscience of our leaders and also speaks truth to power, telling the people in government what they need to do, what they ought to do, and what they have done wrong also. And so I think the religious leaders, they have also a very strong opportunity to be able to be that prophetic voice that the society needs. I have said it somewhere that religious leaders should not focus back on trying to do what government can do. For instance, providing schools, hospitals. They don't have the resources. Churches don't have enough money. No matter how rich they think they are, they don't have the money that the government of Nigeria has to be able to have a very good school.
But don't they owe social responsibility?
Social responsibility is their own call for accountability. They should call for the government to do its own duty. That the poor man's child should be able to go to school for free, or should be able to go to school at the most minimal cost available, so that we are not left with expensive church-owned or mosque-owned universities that poor man child cannot go for. You understand? And so they have a duty, the prophetic role, to be able to call for accountability in this country, that the government does its work. I believe that the government has more resources than any other single organization in this country. In fact, even all the churches or all the mosques put together, they don't have the money that the government has.
Of course, we can never compare in terms of funds.
So why should they compete in the space that is not their own advantage?
I think we're looking at it from the perspective of, let's see, in terms of civic education, because anyway, of course, is in charge of doing that, giving people to understand, supporting, So from since, like Mutar mentioned, the public seems to have trust into religious leaders because they believe in what they say, because of course they are seen as they are referenced as their religious leaders. So how do they stand to also support the government? Because like you said, accountability,
you can't
do it by himself. It's a multi-faceted event.
Get me right. I'm not saying that it's totally out of place for them to go into these things. But what I am saying is that their biggest role at this point in our country, their biggest role is to ask government to sit up to do its own duty. And when we have a working system where religious leaders will say, we cannot accept that kind of school for our own children. We cannot accept this kind of hospital for our own citizens. We cannot accept that our women are dying every day because there is no proper medications or whatever that will take care of them during their childbirth. We want a system that is working. If all these things is in place, several other things that these institutions could do on their own, it's not going to be contested. Nobody is going to even realize that they are doing something that is wrong.
One other aspect when it comes to religious leaders and how they can hold government accountable, one of the problems they will tell you is even welfareism for them, are they adequately taken care of? Because the government, we've seen, they give interventions, and if the government is being allowed to take up these responsibilities, you and I know that the chances of you criticizing someone who has provided welfare for you is limited. So how do we balance that eventually?
This is not an individual thing. If government provides schools, good roads, hospitals, it's not doing it to any religious leader, it's doing it to the country.
Okay.
And if you have no intention of doing this thing for your citizens, you have no business contesting election. You are not there to service yourself, you are there to serve the nation.
True.
And these people are coming from the church or the mosque.
Okay.
They are people that have been molded by these institutions. And so if there is morality that they have learned from these institutions, we should call them to it. This is not what we taught you. You are not our member to go and be doing something else. We have brought you as a Christian or as a Muslim, someone who believes in God, to serve this country, to serve both Muslims and Christians, to give good governance.
Okay.
And that is the link between a religion and good governance. I think Nigeria should be one of the most prosperous or most successful nations because of our religiosity.
Okay, so we would have loved us to stay on this and talk more, but time is not a friend. Want to say a very big thank you to you on this conversation. But as we build up to 2027 election, of course, we know that from what you said, and we are sure that the religious leaders would sit uptight and speak beyond the election, and also have to stand up for accountability and support.
Speak to power,
speak
even
to
if
power.
it's a bitter truth, you're telling them.
That's just what we're looking for, to seeing how it pans out in the long run.
Yes.
We want to say a very big thank you to you, and of course we know your final message has been speak up,
Yes.
hold people accountable, and ensure that the democracy of Nigeria stands really tall.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you very
Well,
much.
that brings us to the size of this discussion, of course, because we understand that from the pulpits to the mosques and from interfaith dialogue to national policy, religious leaders occupy a unique position in Nigeria's public life. The challenge is whether that influence can be transformed into stronger advocacy for peace, accountability, justice, freedom, and good governance, of course. And then we look forward to seeing how that pans out in the long run. Mukhtar.
Most definitely, of course, for Nigeria to achieve whatever progress we want, we have got to have a system where religious harmony is dwelling in the land and everybody is able to practice what they believe in peacefully, and that's how Nigeria can become better, if you ask me.
Of course, Felix Amari, thank you so much. The country representative, Faith and Freedom Africa, thank you for being a part of Global Morning.
Thank you so much. Thank
We
you
appreciate your time with us. And of course, as we said, we have a lot lined up for us. And of course, today's Osun election. As we move on now to join the conversation and see what's happening, we're told that the governor is also on the ground at this polling unit to see how the process is going to also cast his votes. And we'll bring you that after this timer. Please stay with us.